As renewed disruption to the Strait of Hormuz has put a premium on homegrown energy and reminded everyone of fossil fuels' inherent volatility, European policymakers have redoubled their efforts to improve the continent's energy security, which will, in practice, mean using less fossil fuels. Attention has duly turned to Norway, which has, in recent years, become a case study in how to electrify and decarbonize an economy through a mix of financial incentives, infrastructure investment, and stable long-term policy. At the same time, though, Norway recently became Europe's biggest natural gas supplier, providing almost a third of the continent's imports in 2025. More generally, oil and gas are by far the country's most important export, accounting for more than half of the total value of Norway's goods shipped abroad. So in this video, we'll take a look at how one of the world's largest fossil fuel producers electrified its economy, and whether this represents a model for the rest of Europe. Which country has the world's best flag? It's not an important question, certainly not as important as the topic of this video, but we'd still want an answer. So we've set up a survey that lets you vote on your favorite flag from a bunch of random matchups. It's actually really fun. Cast your vote now by clicking the link in the description. Let's first explain what we mean by electrifying an economy. Put very simply, energy consumption can be split into two buckets: burning fuel directly, like petrol cars and gas boilers, and electricity. Electrification means shifting consumption from the first bucket to the second. And this is where Norway has become a real pioneer in Europe. The country's electricity share accounts for more than half of its total energy consumption, compared to roughly 23% for the EU. Now, in order to reduce your reliance on fossil fuels, you have to decarbonize your electricity supply. Luckily, Norway is also a pioneer here. 98% of Norway's electricity comes from renewable sources, way above the global average, which stood at just 33% for 2025. The combination of electrification and decarbonization meant that, in 2025, renewables accounted for 80% of all energy consumption in Norway, the highest in the world, and about triple the EU average. So how did this happen? Well, we think that Norway's progress in the energy transition can be broadly attributed to three things: hydropower, a successful electrification of its heating system, and a successful, if partial, electrification of its transport infrastructure. Let's start with hydropower. Norway discovered very early on how to turn one of the country's abundant elements into a source of renewable energy. In the late 19th century, Norway was already looking into how to build power plants to harness its hydropower potential. Fast forward a couple of centuries to today, and hydropower now accounts for around 90% of the country's electricity generation. It's a pretty stable source of power, given that heavy rainfall and glacial melt provide a reliable flow. On top of that, Norway has a huge reservoir storage capacity, accounting for half of the European total. This means that hydropower plants can keep producing electricity even during dry spells. But even if hydropower accounted for the majority of electricity generation, the next step was electrifying the rest of the economy. Now, Norway is famously cold, so figuring out a way to phase out fossil fuels from the heating sector was a big step towards the country's electrification, which brings us to our second point. Before the 1973 oil crisis, most Norwegians heated their homes with fossil fuels. But when oil prices spiked during the crisis, the country made it a priority to find alternatives and make sure that, over time, fossil fuel heating would become the most expensive option through the introduction of carbon taxes. That push eventually led to a boom in heat pumps, which are now in more than 2/3 of Norwegian homes. For reference, the UK has a stock of 19 heat pumps per 1,000 households. We won't get into technical details of how heat pumps work, but basically, heat pumps use electrical power to pull energy from the air, ground, or water and turn it into heat, a mechanism that works even in freezing temperatures. And run in reverse, it removes heat, much like an air conditioner. Essentially, by taxing fuel and subsidizing heat pumps, Norway successfully electrified its domestic heating system. And since the country's grid runs mostly on hydropower, every time a Norwegian plugs in their heat pump, the electricity behind it is almost 100% clean. The same logic applies to electric vehicles too, which brings us onto our third and final example of Norway's electrification. EVs account for 30% of the entire car fleet, and this figure is increasing with time. Between January and June of this year, for instance, EVs made up 98% of new cars sold in the country. A few things explain this dramatic switch. First, as one of the richest countries in the world, Norway has been able to pour money into EV infrastructure, like charging stations, and offer generous incentives like tax exemptions exemptions, free parking, and even bus lane access. Second, much like it did to get users to adopt heat pumps, Norway made the more polluting option less financially attractive through higher taxes and registration fees. And finally, Norway doesn't really have a domestic car industry, so unlike the UK or Germany, it doesn't have to worry about the potential impact on the sector. Now, as we mentioned in the intro, Norway is still a massive player in the fossil fuel sector. Its sovereign wealth fund, the largest in the world, is built on the country's oil and gas riches and makes it far easier for the state to absorb the cost of these generous green incentives. The point we're trying to make is that the scale and speed of Norway's green transition was no doubt helped by the fiscal space provided by its fossil fuel revenue. This speaks to arguably the core tension at the heart of Norway's green energy story. It's long been one of Europe's biggest fossil fuel exporters, and thus at least indirectly responsible for a significant share of global carbon emissions. So can Norway really call itself a pioneer of the green transition while it continues to actively pollute abroad? Well, we do think that Norway deserves some credit here. For starters, it would be unfair to pin the blame on Norway alone for selling fossil fuels. If other countries followed Norway's domestic playbook and leaned harder into renewables, they'd no doubt need to import less of Norway's oil and gas, which would ultimately shrink the country's fossil fuel sector on its own. Moreover, even if it has been financed by oil and gas revenues, the Sovereign Wealth Fund has also served as a significant investor in the global energy transition, and it's at least true to say that Norway has managed its oil wealth better than almost anyone else. However, this does mean there's a limit to which Norway can serve as a blueprint for the rest of Europe, where the green transition now looks less like a climate nicety and more like a matter of national security. While Norway is pretty solid proof that well-designed financial incentives can work to effectuate the energy transition, the model isn't necessarily replicable for the rest of the continent, given that most European countries don't have Norway-style fiscal cushions or a massive hydropower setup. Now, this is a huge story, and I can imagine that you felt pretty helpless by the headlines recently. And trust us, so have we. And that's not just because we want a comforting story, it's because we need evidence that doing something still matters. You may feel that individual actions are meaningless, but what if we told you that as a community, you can still make a difference? Well, that's why we joined Planet Wild. Planet Wild is not just your usual environmental organisation. It's a passionate community of over 25,000 members, including myself, built around a clear focus: protecting and conserving the world we all live in. We're more aware than ever that the world is a scary place, and the state of our planet needs to change. So every single month, the Planet Wild community funds a mission to protect endangered animals, restore our forests, and clean our oceans. The best part is they document all of the missions through videos on their YouTube channel, so we get to see what our contributions help to achieve. Examples of their incredible work span from training dogs to protect loggerhead sea turtles, restoring the cloud forests of Colombia, to turning a former fish farm into a beaver habitat. So where do you and I come in? Well, by becoming a member, we're directly funding a brand new nature mission from the comfort of our own home. With Planet Wild, you can make an impact without being on the ground yourself. Big or small, your difference matters, and you can contribute as little as $6 a month to help protect nature and give back to the planet that we all share. It's no secret that we're huge fans of Planet Wild, so much so that the first 100 people to sign up with the code NEWSEU7 will get their first month paid for by us. All you have to do is scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description to get started. You can cancel your membership at any time, so there's absolutely no catch with Planet Wild. It's just an amazing way to give back to nature and create a real lasting change. And you'll never be left hanging as to where your money goes, as you'll be able to see the impact in less than 30 days right here on YouTube. So if you want to see them in action, check out their mission transforming a former fish farm into a beaver habitat.